Welcome into TYT's The Conversation and happy Monday. It is Adrienne Lawrence, and today I am joined by UCLA professor and author of Beyond the Valley, Ramesh Srinivasan. And as you may know, because we see him often, Ramesh speaks about intersections of tech, innovation, politics, business, and society. Thanks for joining us, Ramesh.
Hello, Adrienne. It's great to see you after a couple of years.
Yes, it's great to see you as well. And you know what? It seems like a lot has changed, especially this whole new Metaverse thing. Like, what is this stuff?
I mean, this is the strategic direction that big technology companies are taking us. And we also need to recognize that what we might call big technology companies or big tech is no longer restricted to merely tech, right? So like if you think of a company like Airbnb, right? It's a technology company on the one hand, but we're also talking about the biggest hotel accommodation company in the history of the world that basically, fails to unionize almost anyone connected to its enterprise, extracts value out of transactions between someone who may want to rent a place in Uganda and someone who's renting a place in Uganda. So it's thousands of miles away. So really what we've seen during this pandemic, Adrienne, is the massive takeover of privatized and corporate forces that are driving digital technologies of all kinds into our lives, right? We've been dependent on platforms like here, Skype, or on Zoom, all of which are grabbing and harvesting and extracting data to amass the greatest amount of wealth and valuation in the history of the world. And we can see ourselves heading more and more in this direction with climate-related challenges, pandemic-related challenges, and really just generally the privatization of public life, which is, I think, what we see occurring here. So now we all hear about this creepy metaverse. I was talking to my students. So when the Frances Haugen, right, the Facebook whistleblower disclosures came out, I did a lot with the media, progressive media, and like Democracy Now, and also a lot of mainstream media. And the day after that, and I don't think that's accidental, Facebook decided to change its name and therefore signal a certain identity of itself as Meta, which is an allusion to the term metaverse. And so metaverse is the idea of a universe that takes over everything, right? Like think about the term meta, it takes over everything, right? It's not pluriverse, which would be multiple verses, it's metaverse. So why are they talking about that? And what is that? So, if it's okay, I just want to give folks a brief breakdown so they understand the things they need to know about this. So metaverse is a term that came out of cyberpunk literature. I don't know if you ever read that kind of stuff. When I was like a kid, I was pretty into sci-fi, like dystopic sci-fi, but also just sci-fi speculative fiction. I used to read like Octavia Butler, who's like a black sci-fi author, but others too, right? And so Metaverse comes out of the writings of Neil Stephenson, who wrote this book called Snow Crash. And he's sort of similar to this other well-known guy named William Gibson, who's another very famous cyberpunk literature. So this was this idea that they were all writing about basically we would reach this world, there would be very little distinction between our bodies and our digital selves. There would be very little distinction between bits and atoms. And all we would need to do to kind of plug into other worlds, kind of like Matrix style, would be to just tap into the metaverse. So the metaverse, you can kind of see allusions to this in some of Blade Runner, some of like these old like dystopic sci-fi movies, like a little bit Terminator and and RoboCop and things like this. But basically what it is a new virtual world that uses virtual reality and augmented reality technologies, kind of like Second Life, which some of us might remember from like 10 to 15 years ago, where we will all communicate, sort of. We will all interact. It will be like a new world we inhabit. But that world will require a couple things. It will require the use of these augmented reality glasses, right? So note, a company like Facebook owns Oculus, right? Which is its glass sort of interface. Google owns Google Glasses. A lot of other companies own other kinds of what we call interface devices. And when you enter that world, like we were talking about yesterday, is kind of like Truman Show, right? Or a gated community. You enter in this world and the architecture of the world, the design of the world is completely driven by the private company, just like a gated community, right? It will all honestly be rife with surveillance. And for and it's a signaling by Facebook that that's the direction they're heading in. But it's actually not. This is not just about Facebook. Every pretty major tech company, or really companies in general, Microsoft, Google, others, they're all experimenting with different versions of this metaverse. So imagine if you go into this world, you have these glasses on, and say you want to, I don't know, date someone, or say you want to do some financial transaction. You do it all on there. But the thing is, just like the way big tech has invaded our lives, every peer-to-peer interaction, there's a little demon in the middle that's monetizing it, surveilling it, and manipulating that interaction. And that's exactly where they're heading. So when I was talking to my students about the metaverse, like the day after the Frances Haugen testimony, they were all kind of laughing and cracking up. They're like, who would want to wear these dopey glasses? Who would want to like enter into this strange world with like these, hyper pixelated, kind of cheesy looking avatar characters? And I explained to them that that's not really the game here. What's actually occurring is they are trying to incubate a new market, a new territory for extraction of data, just like the environment is extracted by various forms of capitalism, just like labor has been extracted for surplus value, like people like Marx wrote about that centuries ago, or a century plus ago, right? So so it's heading into a place that's not the cheesy goggles, but brain-machine interfaces, like Elon Musk's Neuralink, right? And it's heading into a world where the graphics are going to be that much more powerful.
Wow. That is a lot. And it really seems like that is a lot going on. And it seems that they definitely have their corporate private agendas, which would be getting our data and probably being able to capitalize on it. Would that be accurate?
Data is the most valuable commodity now in the history of the world. And anything that could be quantified or treated as data has now become a new commodity of extraction. Yeah.
Wow. So when you and I had spoken a little bit about this at one point in time, you mentioned that this is going to end up being kind of this new type of feudalism. Can you break that down?
Yeah. So basically, think about it, right? If you enter the metaverse, you have to pay to play, right? If you're a business and you want to advertise your services, you have to pay rent, right? In that world. For all of us who participate in these worlds, and we are kind of not sure what's happening or why we're seeing what we're seeing or what is occurring. So that's very similar to a kind of feudal type of system. It's not a kind of, obviously we've gone so far away from free markets here and even kind of oligopolic capitalism. We're talking about a new kind of digital feudalism. The economist Yanis Varoufakis has talked a lot about this, and so it's sort of, or even on Amazon, they're kind of charging rents. Just think about that. It's kind of rent. It's a rent-based model.
Yeah, and it's a model that's problematic in part because it just, raised the price of prime, but I won't get into that. But I would imagine too, in creating this whole new world that people have to operate in, that there are going to be a number of issues such as labor issues. Is that right?
Without question, right? And also if you think about what the goal of all these companies are around their metaverses, they're triangulating intimate behavioral data, geographical data, commerce data, web services, cloud-based data to all triangulate it. So what's left for workers, huh? That's the question. What's left for the middle and working classes, right? Note, again, the doubling of wealth amongst the wealthiest in the world, most of whom are connected to tech during this pandemic, right? So this is another very, very troubling move for pretty much everybody, but those who have equity and ownership of such companies.
Yikes. And it really seems that this is something that I know we've been very busy in terms of a pandemic and now this war in Ukraine and Russia, but it doesn't seem like something that people are really talking about at the mainstream media level at all. So I'm wondering, essentially, how is this issue being handled? If you can see it, I would imagine others can. So why hasn't, the mass population kind of known a little bit about this?
Because we've yet to see major spectacles or controversies, which we know sell with our media, break out, at least with mainstream media, break out around this, right? Because it's a new kind of space, a new sphere that's being introduced into our lives by all these dominant corporations. So just all the crises we've seen, for example, with Facebook, all the disinformation issues, all the labor issues, all the manipulation issues, all the stuff we've seen around racism and sexism with various algorithms. I know we've talked a little bit about it, Adrian, like just in passing. All of those things are going to refract themselves on this world. But here's the kind of crazy thing: like you could be in a metaverse. I could be in Metaverse. We could be sitting right next to one another and never intersect, even if we're in the same Metaverse, but we could also be in different corporate gatekept Metaverses. So we'll see what happens, but this thing sure as heck needs to be regulated, and there needs to be greater social and political action taken around this.
It definitely sounds like it. And we only have a few seconds left, but can you tell us what should the everyday individual do to kind of prepare for this?
I think we need to be very wary of using any of these systems. I think we should try to advocate with our legislators, even if they don't know much about it. Usually, sometimes their staff members do, to try to do anything we can to change it. To let them know we're not okay with these things being introduced without like the proper kind of public-based governance, right? Because we're seeing technologies introduced across the board that are threatening people, facial recognition, AI systems, algorithmic systems, and they always threaten the most vulnerable people. And that's why we got to stop it on both our personal level as well as any public engagement we have.
Awesome, Ramesh. And can you please tell the viewers where they can find more information about you and the work that you do?
Well, I'm on Twitter, but I'm not that active. I don't think I'm not as active as you. Adrian, Ramesh Media, so RAMESH Media. Oh, it's right there. Also, my website. So I'm a professor at UCLA, but RameshSrinivasan.org will reach me. And my goal is for us to humanize technology so it serves all of us and our planet. And I have optimism that we can get there, but I appreciate you all having me.
Well, I definitely appreciate that in terms of your optimism and for all of your insight. Thank you for joining us, Ramesh. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.